friends, I wanted to do a quick wrap up of the rest of April's reading. It was a great reading month. I had a lot of fun with what I was reading, and I will post my first half of the month video below. The second half of the month went really well, and I found a new favorite book, 5-star. So the first book I read in the second half was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is not my new favorite, unfortunately. I do enjoy Maggie O'Farrell, and I enjoyed this. The Marriage Portrait, Maggie O'Farrell's more recent book I read last year, and it was one of my favorite books of last year. This one, we follow Hamnet, who is the son of William Shakespeare and his wife Agnes. Hamnet, in real life, historically, was a real person, was Shakespeare's son, who died at a young age. He died around 11 years old. And there's not a lot known about what happened to Hamnet. So Maggie O'Farrell, as she writes in the author's note, kind of fictionalizes what she thinks could have happened. And at the time, in the place where Hamnet and his family lived, there was a plague. And so we open kind of with Hamnet's sister Judith is sick, and kind of takes us through their relationship. It also takes us in the past, looking at Shakespeare's early life and his meeting and courtship with Agnes, Hamnet's mother, and kind of brings the two storylines together. I enjoyed this. I think I gave it, I gave it 3.5 stars. There were chapters that really slowed the story down, and I can't remember if I said I did this as a buddy read with Krista at Books and Jams, and one of Krista's points reactions to it was more about the writing and less about the plot, and I definitely can see that. Maggie O'Farrell has different kind of genres that she writes in. This is definitely a historical fiction, but it's definitely more literary historical fiction. And some of it was just unnecessary and, like I said, slowed the story down. I liked it. I'm glad I read it, and will probably keep it because I do have a collection of Maggie O'Farrell's books. The Marriage Portrait, which she wrote last year, I think. It was one of my favorite books of last year. This is kind of a middle of the road for me. So that was Hamnet. The other buddy read I did was John Galsworthy's The Forsyte Saga. I did this with my friend Andy. She and I. So this whole book, this is all the Forsyth books that John Galsworthy wrote. So we read the first book, and I did not like it. I gave it, oh gosh, what did I give it? Did I even write it down? I think I wanted to completely forget this book. I gave it 2 stars. This is about a rich white family who, the first book is called Man of Property, and the kind of overarching story is about the family, the Forsyte family, and their many adult siblings. Like it's got a really intense family tree. I'm trying to keep track of who all is related to who, and the property is the physical property of building a house and land and things like that, but it also is looking at property in the sense of women and relationships, and I just didn't have time for that. It was boring. It was a little boring for me. And how they treat women, I don't care if it was the time. I just don't want to read about it anymore. So I am not going to read the rest of the Forsyte saga. All right, I think I've talked about this, and I can't remember if I put this in the first half of the month video, but Western Lane by Chechna Maru. I read this, was one of the long listed books on the Women's Prize for Fiction. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.5 stars. It is about a father and 3 sisters who have lost their mother, and one of the sisters kind of takes to the game of squash at the encouragement of her father, and how that helps and kind of walks her through grief, dealing with grief, and some of the relationships dynamics that they have with some of their extended family and neighbors and such. It was so good. It's a small book, and I think I said this in one of my other videos. I was put off by this book because I heard it was about squash, which I like sports, but I don't like squash. I'm not interested in squash. I don't know why. I'm just not interested in squash. But I really enjoyed this book. So the next book I read is one of my new favorites, and that is The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. I saw this recommended by a number of people on BookTube, and thank you to all of you because I loved this. In this one we have Bree and Nathan. Bree is a former dancer who got injured and now runs a dance studio, and Nathan is an extremely hot NFL legend, and he is her best friend. And so they're kind of in the friend zone, and Bree, from the beginning, you know that she has a crush on him, and she just kind of is there and interacts with the women that he dates, and yeah, it's just a sweet little story, and I really liked it. The next one I read, is this the next one I read? So I started to read The Waterkeeper by Charles Martin. This was a book club book, and I just couldn't get into it. The writing was fine, the storyline was fine. I just couldn't get into it, so ended up DNFing that one. The next one I read was I Was Amelia Earhart by Jane Mendelsohn. This I realized was, I think it was nominated for the Women's Prize for Fiction years ago. I was just looking at the past books that they were, the past books that had been nominated, and I saw this on there. I was like, hey, I think I own that. This is about basically a fictionalized account of what could have happened with Amelia Earhart's last flight. And I don't want to give too much away, but let's see. Yeah, so she tells about her relationship with her navigator, Fred Noonan. That's a true story. Like, that was her navigator who was with her on the flight. Her marriage to GP, who promoted her fame, and she goes into that relationship as well. and they end up kind of in a little adventure of sorts. And so it sort of takes a similar vibe to Hamnet, is that we don't know what happened to Amelia Earhart's last flight. It's assumed that it went down. But this kind of takes a little bit of a fictionalized account of what could have happened, I rated this 3.5 stars. I really thought it was kind of fun. Not fun, but it was fun. Just thinking about, what might have been, since we don't know what might have been. And it's a short little book. I love short little books. So at this point in the month, I thought I really need to try and read some of my TBR that I picked out for my TBR jar. And one of the prompts was a book with a one-word title. So I picked Lauren Groff's The Matrix, just Matrix. This is about Marie, who is an illegitimate child in the royal court, sent off to live in a convent, and she becomes the prioress, the head of, and runs the convent. I read about 100 pages of this, and I've read Lauren Groff before, and I do like her writing. I just didn't care about the story. It was kind of dull. Nothing was really happening. It was not pulling me in at all. So I decided to DNF it, because there's lots of other books that I'd like to try. So that's kind of a bummer, but gotta move on. A library book I did read was The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. This was a graphic novel. I'm not usually, I don't gravitate towards graphic novels, but I had seen this recommended by a couple different people on BookTube and wanted to try it out. I enjoyed it. I think I gave it about 3 stars. The illustrations are really beautiful. The story itself was a bit choppy, but and not much depth to it, but it's also a pretty short book. I have the other 2 out from the library. I'm not sure if I'll continue in it. It was okay for me. And then another new favorite, because I just kept going with the romance books. This is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. I loved this book. It was so fun. This book, I've heard about it. I guess I have heard about it before. I got it based on the recommendation from Christy at Christy Reads a Lot. She was talking about slow burns, and I really felt like, the cheat sheet was definitely a slow burn, and enjoyed that. Both of these were so good. Were just what I needed for my little experiment, if you will, on romance. So with The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, we're following Vanessa, who is the assistant to this very large defensive, and they call it the NFO, National Football Organization, like one of the top defensive players. And he is very aloof and distant as her employer, but she decides to quit and follow her own dreams. And he comes back to her apartment a couple weeks later. She comes home and finds him, and he's like, nah, I want you to come back. And they kind of go through this back and forth with, I don't want to come back, I need you to come back, I don't want to come back. And then they, you know, the story goes on from there, and they do end up back in an arrangement, business arrangement, and is definitely a slow burn. It got a little, just enough spicy at the end, and it was so good. I bought this and read it within a couple of days, and it's a 500 page book, almost 500 page book. It was so good, so good. That's all that I read the second half of the month, but it, like I said, it was overall, it was very good. What am I reading right now? Good one. I am about to start my buddy read of Magic Hour by Kristen Hanna with Lori from Books, Ink, and Paper. So that will get started soon. And I also want to start Brotherless Night by Vivi Ganeshanathan. And this is a book that is shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I think I'm pretty sure it's shortlisted for the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction as well. So I'm kind of curious, since it's on both lists. I've started to hear a lot more about it. I also am plugging away at Medicine Woman by Lucy H. Pierce. This is about the treatment of women in medicine, in the medical community, and chronic illness. It shares a little bit about Lucy's own history with chronic illness. So that's kind of where I'm at. What are you reading? Did you have any 5-star books that you read in April? Let me know in the comments. I'm very curious. And I'll see you soon. Bye.